mean to say that we come up here and mime our presentations, but there's more to communicating with our audience than just simply what comes out of our mouth. Quick introduction first. My name is Steve Dawson. I don't have a clicker in my hands, perhaps that's the first step to smart presentations. I used to be a journalist. I used to be an accountant, I should say, with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Singapore. Prior to that, I did 6 years in London as well. I wasn't very good, so I became a journalist for the Straits Times shortly after I moved to Singapore. And the Straits Times got a license to have a television channel. So they had people go to a news event, file the news story for the newspaper, but then at the same time, file a broadcast story for the television news that evening. And we were called Channel I News, and we were quite a successful, small but successful little team. We won the Asian Broadcasting Awards for the best news program in all of Asia. CNN were nominees that year, and also an outfit from the Philippines, but we were the champions. We were quite proud of ourselves. I then got headhunted by ESPN and Star Sports. If you were a sports fan living in this country or any country around Southeast Asia, you might be familiar with those brands. I presented SportsCenter on ESPN, which is the nightly sports news program. I also did Formula One for everybody in Asia, all the way across to India and Pakistan for about 8 years. When we got rebranded in Asia only as Fox Sports, I then became the football guy, and I did lots of Asian football, some German football, as you can see here. Aside from Fox Sports, I did well over 100 shows for One Championship, that's mixed martial arts, and to this day I still commentate and present things like Porsche Carrera Cup and Japanese ladies golf and some table tennis and football commentary and things like that. These days that's about 30% of my time. About 70% of my time is coaching executives, people like yourselves, to present in your world. That could be up here on a stage in front of 200-300 people. It could be in a boardroom in front of 3, 6, 8 very, very intimidating, big-brained people. Could be looking down the barrel of a camera, going on video, maybe doing a town hall meeting to audiences in branches and companies within your organization right around the world. The thing that I want to talk about today, as I said, is how to connect with your audience in a very authentic way, other than simply with your voice. And body language is a key to that, one or two other things as well. What you see on the screen now are the results of a very old study, actually. This study's been around for quite a while. It may actually be familiar to some of you. And this is talking about the way in which an audience, as I stand before you, how do you connect with what I'm saying? How is it that you manage to appreciate what I'm trying to share with you? 38% of the messaging that I give you is understood by you in terms of tonality and intonation, which I find quite interesting. I realise now, having spent 30 years in Southeast Asia, all of which is in Singapore, that's where I live, intonation plays a different role in Mandarin, for example, but in the English language, it's more about the stress of a certain word in a sentence, and that can change the meaning. So, for example, if I say the sentence, "I like the slides you made yesterday," and I change the emphasis on the words in that sentence, it changes the meaning. So if I say, "I like the slides you made yesterday," the implication is that I like them, but somebody else doesn't. "I like the slides you made yesterday." In other words, the slides you made were really good, but the rest of your presentation was awful. "I like the slides you made yesterday." That means your slides were great, but your colleagues' slides were pretty dreadful. "I like the slides you made yesterday." Means yesterday's slides were really good, but today's slides not so good. So same sentence, exactly the same sentence, emphasizing different words within that sentence, changing the meaning completely. And I think we can't just afford to say brilliant things. We may have amazing content to say, but I think we have to live and feel that content and stress keywords in a sentence in order to make sure that our messaging really is hitting home. So that's tonality and intonation. 7% of the meaning that people like you get when someone like me stands before you comes from the words I use. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Think about how much time we spend putting those words together, and yet it only contributes to 7% of your total understanding. Seems bizarre. The reason this slide is up here is because, evidently, the results show that 55% of the meaning, the understanding that you get when someone like me stands before you comes from non-verbal cues. Not what I'm saying, or even how I'm saying it, but what I'm doing with my body. And that's body language and other things about my physicality that's happening while I'm speaking to you. Remarkable results. But I believe them very effective to think about these things. So what do you think about body language? Let's have a look at a couple of photos. Remember, we're not hearing anything here. We're not reading anything. Nobody's communicating anything with us verbally. All we're seeing is the way people are holding themselves. But you can tell an awful lot, and this is just a still photograph, it's not even video. You can tell an awful lot, can't we, about these two people. Their relatives standing with each other. Who's the important one? Who thinks he's the most important one? Who's the one who wants to appeal to the greater audience? Who's the one who really just wants to appeal to the other fella in the picture? How about this one? I think this is a fabulous photograph. Lady in blue on the left-hand side. What do we think? What is her body language telling us about what she may or may not be wanting to communicate? And that's key, by the way. Our body language isn't necessarily showing what we want to communicate. It may share things that we don't actually want to communicate, which is why we need to be aware of it. What is she communicating to you? Any thoughts? I see clenched fists. I see her looking down. I think she's a little bit fearful, maybe a little bit apprehensive, not comfortable, I would say. What about the guy in the red tie? Also doesn't look particularly comfortable with the situation, but he's overcoming it. He's being a strong person about it. He's looking ahead. I think he wants to move on from this situation. This is the handover, isn't it, when Obama left office and in came Trump. I think he wants to get past this, all these niceties, and get on with business, doesn't he? What about blue tie guy, who helpfully, thanks to Paul, has an arrow pointing at his face? Thank you. Blue tie guy, well, what do you think? What do you think? I think he's a little bit having too much fun, I would say, actually. Huh? School's out for him, it's all over, he's done his term, handing it over to someone else. The whole world's going to go to, but it doesn't matter. He's done his bit. Joking, very jocular, very relaxed. Maybe too relaxed, because if we look at Red Coat Lady, what are your impressions? My impressions are that she's kind of saying, calm down, come on, behave a little bit, another 20 minutes or so, then you can relax. Whatever it is you're seeing, and that's just the impressions I've shared, but whatever it is you're seeing here, remember there's no words being said. We're not reading anything, we're not hearing anything, there's no dialogue whatsoever. It's not even a video. It's just a still picture, and yet it portrays so much. Therefore, perhaps not surprising, the results of that survey that came out, so much of the messaging that audiences like yourselves take from somebody who stands on a stage comes from non-verbal communication. How do we master this body language when we're on stage? There's so many things to think about, right? Content recall, getting over our nerves, making sure we've got enough water to drink, that sort of thing. The very first, most basic and easiest thing to do, I would say, not easy for everyone actually, but probably the most easy thing to do, is just smile. If we're wanting to share our message with everybody, what we're trying to do is get everybody on our side. We're trying to be approachable. We want people to ask us questions because we want them to be interested in our content. we can't be prickly, we can't afford to be, to push everyone away. We want to be approachable. We want to encourage people to find out more. A presentation can only ever be flavorful. We can't provide massive amounts of detail. You'll be very, very bored if we do that. I want to sort of turn you on, get you excited and enthusiastic about whatever it is I have to share. And then I want you to try and find out more. We can do that in a meeting, or I can send you a file or an email. We can have coffee, we can have a phone call, whatever it is. In order to do that, I have to be approachable. And the easiest way to do that is to smile. Think about all the presentations you've seen today, and a lot of approachable people today. But if you presented today, or if you watched presenters, think about how much better your presentation would have been if you'd smiled more often. I'm smiling now, just thinking about it. Smiling makes an awful lot of difference. Importantly, even if you're sharing bad news. If you're telling your organization that there's going to be retrenchments, that we're going to lose 30% of our workforce, that some of your colleagues, some of your friends are going to lose their jobs, you can still have empathy, and often that comes in a smile. We're not laughing and joking about you losing your jobs, though. You can all control this, you can all manage this in an empathetic way. You don't want to be grim, you don't want to be aggressive, let's be smiling. Energy is a key thing here. You can have too much energy, it can be distracting. So we don't want to do that. It's a bit of a vague concept. When I was a reporter for Channel I, the award-winning news show that I mentioned earlier on, I went out into the field. My job was to bring a cameraman with me, go to the news event. We'd record some footage, I'd interview some people, I'd do a piece to camera, look down the camera and do a little report. We'd take some footage and then I'd put a script together and do a voiceover. We'd edit it all together and you'd have a 75, 90-second piece that would then be a video item on the news. What I really wanted to be, though, was a news anchor. I wanted to be the presenter. And my executive producer was aware of this, and what they did was they allowed me to audition to do a screen test. So one morning, the very next morning, after our bulletin had gone out on air the night before, they allowed me to do a full mock-up of the show. I was the presenter, cameras were rolling, we threw to all of the videotapes, did the whole half-hour show. And I thought to myself, okay, this is my big chance. All I really need to do is be word perfect, be clear, have a nice pace, not make any stumbles or fumbles, and everything should be fine. And at the end of the half hour, by and large, I thought I'd done that. I thought I'd achieved my goal. So I went up to my executive producer and said, so what do you think? And she said, you need more energy. I said, what do you mean more energy? Do you want me to do cartwheels or what is it? What do you mean more energy? She couldn't tell me. She couldn't actually tell me. It is a very vague concept. Energy on television, energy on stage, energy when you're standing before any size audience and presenting to them. It is a vague concept. But 20 years later, having been a newscaster, having been an anchor, on stage, in studio, and coached many hundreds of people to present, I think I know what energy is in this context. And this is what I want to share with you today. So it isn't jumping around, it certainly isn't doing cartwheels, it isn't shouting, nobody likes to be shouted at, but actually projection is quite key. Having a microphone in a big room like this is important. If you're in a boardroom, the ability to speak to the people at the back of the room is important. We're not all built that way, we're not all wired that way, but there are ways to allow yourself to be projected. So it's not shouting. In essence, though, it's about being present. Those of you who are parents, we all long to spend time with our children, but we're all very, very busy. We end up spending time with our children, perhaps we're on the phone, perhaps we are answering emails, perhaps we're thinking about other things. Are we actually present? Are we being active in our children's lives? Well, it's the same in a presentation. It's not just about being there, and speaking and delivering amazing content. It's about actually being present while we do it. It's about the desire, having the desire in and around your mind during the whole presentation for advocacy among your audience. I really want you to agree and support everything that I'm saying. Agree with and support everything that I'm saying. I want that advocacy from you. It's not just a question of me delivering. I want you to go, yes, you're right. I believe you and I agree with you. And if you have that feeling, then other great things will come along with it. Stressing the word in a particular sentence, as I mentioned before. I don't want you to be speaking and thinking to yourself, okay, I've got to remember to stress the third word in this sentence. Stress the third word in this sentence. I don't want you to think like that. I want you to just do it naturally. And if you have this desire for advocacy amongst your audience, for them to support what you're saying, it should all come naturally. This is it in summary. It's the tonality and the intonation that I mentioned. This is what will come naturally if you need and want this support from your audience. Hand movement. I'm doing it now, being expansive. There's no use standing here like this and just talking to everybody like this for half an hour. Certainly don't stand like that for half an hour. Don't even stand like this, because I'm a good little boy and I'm performing and I'm being really nice to everybody. What we want you to be is a Starbucks presenter. We want you to be a natural presenter. We want you to be somebody who conveys information just like you convey information to a friend if you are having a coffee with them at Starbucks. In a natural, authentic way. And when we do that, when we're with our friends, we're usually quite animated. We move our hands. We move our eyes and our head. You know, we reflect what it is we're saying with our face and with our body language. And that's the real way to communicate. That's a natural, authentic way to communicate. Far more than just what comes out of our mouth, of course. I've got a video here. Paul, can you activate it in a moment, if you can? This is the lady who has tremendous eyebrows, very much like Paul, actually. Tremendous eyebrows. And when she speaks, she raises her eyebrows or she sinks her eyebrows, and her face conveys exactly what she's saying. Let's see if we can play the video and have a look.
I used to think the whole purpose of life was pursuing happiness. Everyone said the path to happiness was success, so I searched for that ideal job, that perfect boyfriend, that beautiful apartment. But instead of ever feeling fulfilled, I felt anxious and adrift. And I wasn't alone. My friends, they struggled with this too. Eventually, I decided to go to graduate school for positive psychology to learn what truly makes people happy. But what I discovered there changed my life. The data showed that chasing happiness can make people unhappy. And what really struck me was this. The suicide rate has been rising around the world, and it recently reached a 30-year high in America. Even though life is getting objectively better by nearly every conceivable standard, more people feel hopeless, depressed, and alone. There's an emptiness gnawing away at people, and you don't have to be clinically depressed to feel it. Sooner or later, I think we all wonder, is this all there is?
I'm not saying Emily's the best presenter ever, far from it, but she does the very best with what she has. When she's talking about suicide and everybody being depressed and alone, her brow is furrowed, her eyebrows go down. When she's talking about happiness, her eyebrows go up. She's mirroring, reflecting what she's saying with her face, with her body language. And I think that's what we all need to try and achieve. And that's about really feeling what you're saying rather than just simply delivering it. I think we can all do it. It's easier for some of us than it is for others. Some of us are particularly expressive. We've seen great examples of that today. Other people a little bit more reserved. But I'm sure there are times when you're not reserved, when you're free-flowing, when you're relaxed, when you're able to speak to a friend at Starbucks over coffee. See if you can bring that personality onto the stage or into the boardroom. It doesn't mean that you're belittling your subject matter. It doesn't mean that you are losing gravitas. It just means that you're communicating very, very well, very effectively. Interestingly, even when we are presenting in a remote situation, which we do far more than we used to do before 2020, we can still bring this body language into relevance. This is a screenshot from Star Trek, the original Star Trek, which was shot in the 60s. So they were looking ahead to the possibility of remote communication, of video conferencing. And yet when they imagined it unencumbered by technological problems and things that inhibit our ability to communicate, this is what they came up with. They came up with somebody who is actually looking at us. And yet even today, this is not something we quite achieve. And therefore we lose the connection. Look at my stupid friends. Look through your phones and look at all the Wi-Fi's you take, and the selfies even. Almost everybody in the photograph is not looking at the camera lens, and therefore they're not looking at you, the person looking at the picture. They're all looking at themselves on the screen. My stupid friend here is doing that, and my stupid friend here is doing that. I'm the only one that's looking at you because I looked at the lens on the camera rather than the screen to see how my hair was. Of course, I had a quick look to see how my hair was, but after I'd done that, then I took the picture by looking at the lens. If my dog can do it, you can do it too. So the secret is to look there if you're video conferencing. Not so worried about your selfies and your Wi-Fi's, but if you're presenting online in a remote situation, do your audience a favor by looking at them in the eye. Yes, we may be thousands of miles apart, but you can still make a connection if you look people in the eye. If I came up to you and looked 3 inches above your head or at your neck, you'd think it was very strange. We talk to people by looking them in the eye, and that's achieved by looking at the camera, not at the screen. When we video conference, typically, we might use a phone, but we probably use a laptop. This is where we should be looking when we're speaking. Now, if it's a two-way thing, and I'm not here to talk about meetings, I'm really here to talk about presentations, but if there is a two-way element, if people are talking to you, I think you owe it to them to look at their face while they're speaking, for the very reasons that we've been discussing already, so that you can see more of what they're trying to share, not just their words. Look at their facial expression. What are they really feeling while they're speaking? By all means, look at the screen there. But when you're speaking, get into the habit of looking at the camera lens, not the screen. That way you'll make that eye contact, or at least it will appear so. A friend of mine, a client of mine, actually puts a little paper sticker up by the camera and draws a little smiley face on it, so that she reminds herself that if she looks at the camera, she's looking at somebody's face, and that's how it will appear to her audience. And that's what we should be going for. So don't look at the screen when you're presenting, look at the camera. That's all I wanted to say about making a connection, about presenting with things other than your voice. You know, we could put a speaker here, and we could have an automated voice. Let's face it, automated voices are getting better now, but maybe a year or so ago, we could put an automated voice through a speaker on stage to say everything that I just said, with even better content maybe, but you would all have fallen asleep, because that automated voice is not using his or her hands, not using eyebrows, not smiling at you, not looking at you. And that's how we make a connection. That's how we make presentations with more than just our voice. I've seen some lovely examples of that today. Really happy with a lot of the things I saw. Personally, I'm very happy with a lot of the presentations that happened today. Really good connections. Love the fact that the slides were clear and flavorful and not competing with the presenter. And I love that we saw personality coming through. As I said in Ho Chi Minh, albeit in another context, people do business with people. They don't do business with decks. They don't do business with just presentations. It's people we do business in. If we invest in businesses, we're investing in the people. So we want to know what the authentic you is like if you're on stage. And And that means that you need to become a Starbucks presenter, not a formal business presenter, because that's not the real you. You won't lose gravitas, it will still be important, and you'll be investable. That's my presentation. If you'd like to have your people coached in business presentations, I do one-on-one sessions, I do classroom sessions. My website is there, my email address is there. I'll be coaching Paul very shortly.